This interview is from Chat City, Preston FM's mid-morning magazine show, live weekdays from 10 till noon.
It's your Preston FM. It's the world's local radio station on TuneIn Radio, online, and of course on FM and live from Preston. Okay, in the autumn of 1942, 15-year-old Ruby is collected from her aunt's guest house by her grandfather. She's taken to live with him in a village in industrial Lancashire, where a few days after her arrival, a number of US quartermaster truck companies of black troops take over a nearby camp. That's the story of Ruby's War, and the author is a local author. It's Johanna Winard, and I'm pleased to say Johanna is in the studio with me now. So very good morning to you, Johanna.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you. And of course, this being the centenary of the Great War, of the First World War, the story, of course, just lends itself to be read, particularly this year, any time to be read, but particularly this year. Johanna, tell us a little about yourself. Is this the first book that you've written?
It is the first book that I've written, yes. I began to write seriously after my parents died, because that's when I felt I had a little bit more time to myself, and I took a creative writing course in Chorley, and then I did an MA in Manchester, and this is my second attempt. My first book got me an agent, and my second attempt has been published.
And is your first book out? Is it still out in publication?
No, I didn't get my first book published. No, I couldn't get it published. But it was the first book got me an agent, a literary agent, and the second book we sold to a London publisher. Right. And that's Ruby's War.
So Ruby's War. The storyline, how did it come to you? I mean, was it something that, had been planted some time ago, that this was a story that you wanted to write? Or was it particularly given that this is the centenary of the Great War that the story lent itself to be written?
No, I started the book in 2008, and the themes, I was interested in looking at what would happen to an orphan who was taken into an industrial village in the war, because I wanted to explore the poverty, and I was interested in what happened to people during the war, and particularly at the end of the war, and how people began to hope for changes that didn't actually happen after the First World War. For instance, the NHS and all the improvements, pensions, etc. So that was one theme that I was interested in. And because I used to live in Lostock Hall, obviously I knew about the black troops, and I'd always been fascinated. In that area, the story about the black troops is almost a folk memory. Everyone remembers it. Everyone talks about it. And it was something that I was fascinated about, and I began to research into it. To begin with, I wrote a play, and I wasn't happy with it, and then I sort of saw that I could build these two things together, and that's how Ruby's War started.
Right. So is there a strong correlation then, in a way, a crossover between fact and fiction?
In my book,
yes.
I mean, it is historically factual. I did an awful lot of reading, an awful lot of research. There's a bibliography at the back, and in fact, one of the critics has complimented me on my accuracy.
Wow!
But I have jiddled with the timeline slightly of the actual mutiny, but only very slightly. But I did feel that I had to get my facts right, yes.
Right. So when writing such a book then, does the facts come first and the fiction then surrounds the facts, the storyline?
It's difficult to say. I was fascinated by the story. I read an awful lot of diaries, mass observation diaries. I read a lot of personal testimony from the black troops. And I think that began to spark ideas. And I think then the characters take over. I definitely wanted the troops not to be just ciphers, not just to be poor guys that other people helped. I wanted them to have an independence of their own and to learn from their experiences and actually begin to see that there was something that they could do, that they could use their experiences of the war when they went back home in the civil rights movement. I really felt that I needed to do that.
Right. And when you're writing the book, I mean, do the characters in a way take over? Do you get to really know those characters, and do you change their personalities in the writing of the story?
Oh, I think so. I think you do. I mean, I think by the end of the book, you actually you feel as though you could walk down the street and actually bump into them. I mean, they are so real. And you do, I think you also go through a sort of grieving process when you finish the book.
Yes.
And once it's out there, you feel quite protective. It's very much like sending a child to school on the first day. You feel very protective about what's going to happen to your book.
So could you tell us a little about the main characters in the book and just a little of the storyline without giving too much away? We need to get our listeners going buying the book.
Well, Ruby, as I said, she's been living in Blackpool. Her mother has been killed. Her grandfather comes to take her to live with him. Very reluctantly, he doesn't want her to have the responsibility. And the rest of his family don't actually realise that she's going to arrive, and they don't think that she's going to stay. And it's a story about loss, and it's a story about becoming an adult, really, because she's just on the cusp of becoming an adult. She's had an awful traumatic experience, and it's her coming to terms with that and her coming of age. It's not a sad book. It's quite a funny book. Particularly her grandfather is quite a scamp, and he has lots of sort of funny experiences. And he also has a friend who's called Johnny Finn, who's an ex-prize fighter, and they're quite a comedic part of the book. The soldiers, there are 3 of them. Con is the main one. He is a middle-class boy. His father is a preacher. He's been brought up in quite a conservative household. He's very patriotic, and he decided to volunteer. And he actually is underage. And he's quite shocked by the poverty. And this is also quite accurate, that some of the troops were quite shocked by the poverty in this country, particularly if they come from one of the big cities. And they're obviously outraged by the way that they're being treated, because some of them had much more discrimination once they were in the army than they'd actually experienced before that. And that's what has happened to Con. He's quite educated, and he's quite shocked by the sort of poverty that he sees around him. And he also begins to grow. He meets an old lady in the village who has a library of her own, a private library, and both he and Ruby borrow books from her, and as a result of that they begin to grow as people. And he, from being terrified of the military police, actually realises that he's going to have to stand up for himself, and that's what he eventually does.
Right. And how long did it take you, the book, in the writing to put it together?
I would say about a couple of years to write it. And then, of course, once it's accepted by a publisher, there are rewrites, lots of checking. They're quite funny, actually, because I use a lot of Lancashire words, and because it's a London publisher, some of the words were a bit strange to them. For example, bagging. They had no idea what bagging was. Ruby takes her bagging, makes up her bagging and takes it to the factory. And they would absolutely, please can you explain what bagging is? So it was quite funny, and it was very interesting. And they were very helpful. I mean, they obviously have people who proofread, and they have people who check facts. And I had an incident. There was a pigeon service in the war where pigeons were commissioned to fly out. They took them into Normandy, for example, taking messages. And I wrote about this, and they sort of queried that and asked me to check again, and which I did, and had to send them the photocopy of the stuff that I've found as evidence. So it was quite carefully checked.
Yes. Did you, when you started on the journey of writing the book, with it also having such facts, did you realise the journey that you were undertaking then? Was it an enjoyable journey of finding out all the factual information and then wrapping the storylines around it?
Oh, it was. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I mean, for instance, there were indoor fireworks. I didn't know there were indoor fireworks. But I had to include it. I mean, I just had to find out about the indoor fireworks. And I use that in the book. So sometimes finding a fact did actually spark a scene. So it was sort of, that happened. And also I think when I was a child, there were still things about from the war. I still have a little blouse that was made of parachute silk, and things like that. Were little mementos, and it did seem to me when I was a child that people still talked about it a lot, and you had it was a ghost in the room all the time, I think, when people were chatting.
Right. And in the writing of the book, did you already have the conclusion, the end of the book in your head, or did that change as you were writing the book?
It did change. It changed, yes. Yes, I wasn't sure what was going to happen at the end of the book. And I think once I got to know the characters, then I did change it quite significantly, yes.
Does that happen like switching a light on? You don't really know how you're going to end the story, but then in the writing of it, that point suddenly comes when you know that that's the way you're going to have to end the story.
It does. I mean, sometimes it comes as you're writing. Unfortunately, sometimes it comes in the middle of the night. If you write, you tend to be an insomniac. Two things go together. I mean, sometimes you can be walking around Sainsbury's and think, I know, that's what I should do.
So I can understand the statement that you make, that in a way there's a grieving process at the end of the book, when you've written the book, in then thinking, well, what do I do next? Or is the feeling more about thinking, I should have done that, or I should have changed that, or do you want to then go back and rewrite it?
No, I think I don't with that book. I think sometimes you do write things and then put them away and think, actually, I think I would do something different the next time. But no, I think I can honestly say that I'm quite happy with the way that the book turned out, and I'm quite happy with my characters.
Right.
Happy with what happened to them, yeah.
And the book was released, when was it released?
At the end of March.
The end of March. And for people who want to get a copy, the availability, Johanna?
Well, they're definitely available in Waterstones. Waterstones have been very kindly have agreed to keep my book. So, yes, go along. I'm going to go along myself today and look at it on the shelf. I'm very proudly have a look at it on the shelf. I'm also giving readings. I'm giving a reading at Lostercall Library on the 24th of June and one at Bamberbridge Library on the 26th, both in the afternoon. And I'm hoping to do one at Adlington Library, but that will be in the autumn. And I've also been invited to give readings at West Horton and Bolton, but I'm not quite sure of the dates yet.
Right. And what comes next? Are you planning, have you already got that thought of the next book? Yes,
I have. The next book is also set in Preston. I've signed a contract for 2 books. The next one is very, very different, but yes, I'm sort of well on the way with it.
So as we were saying, if you're now looking at 2 future books, the next one being set in Preston, as you're walking around the city, you're here with me today in Preston, I mean, are you mentally alive in kind of visionary thoughts of when you walk around the streets of what's going to go into the next book? Do things come to you that then make you think, oh, I need to put that into the book, or I'll write that into the book, or there's some train of thought here that will lead me into a chapter for the book?
I think it's what I call serendipity. Things just do appear. I don't know if it's because you're subconsciously thinking, your subconscious is sort of working all the time, but things will just appear and you'll think, wow, I really could use that. Yes.
Right. So it's Ruby's War. It's available from Waterstones. I've just been looking at it also online, so you can get it on Amazon and other outlets. And it's written by my guest this morning in the studio, Johanna Winard. So, Johanna, can I thank you for coming in again? Just give us the dates of the talk so people can come along.
Yeah, sure. Lostock Hall, 3 o'clock on the 24th of June, and Bamber Bridge, 3 o'clock on the 26th of June.
And I look forward, hopefully, to interview you prior to the release of your next book. Does it yet have a title, or is that still to be? It doesn't have a
title yet, no, unfortunately, no.
So one or two titles up there that you're thinking about at the moment?
Indeed.
Well, I look forward to meeting you prior to the next one being published. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
If you've got news, views or events you'd like to share with us and the Chat City team, why not give us an email? chatcity@preston.fm